Hello and welcome to this India Today and Business Today special coming to you from the World Economic Forum in icy cold Davos in Switzerland. And it couldn't be coming at a more appropriate time because the world is facing arguably its most complex geopolitical and geo-economic challenges since the Second World War. Over the next few days, my colleague Siddharth Zarabi, the group editor of Business Today, and I, Rajdeep Sardesai, will take you through all that's happening as world leaders converge here in Davos, including the man of the moment, the US President Donald Trump. We'll have thought leaders and newsmakers join us here on India Today, Business Today at this Davos Brainstorm. And who better to kick off this special coverage than Børge Brende, the president of the World Economic Forum, the former foreign minister of Norway. Thank you very much, Mr. Brende, for joining us here at the World Economic Forum. You couldn't have chosen, one would argue, a more appropriate time to bring world leaders together, and you've called it the spirit of dialogue. But out there in the real world, we're seeing very little dialogue and more confrontation. In fact, even as we speak, a potential confrontation now politically and economically between Europe and the United States over Greenland. How are you seeing dialogue in this conflicting world?
You know, dialogue is a prerequisite for making any kind of progress. And you're right. Currently, the dialogue going on is really challenged. That's for sure. And as you said, we are faced with the most complicated geopolitical backdrop since 1945. But still, in Davos here, we have 65 heads of states and governments, 1,000 of the leading CEOs of the world. So hopefully, by having him here, inside and not outside, because it's pretty cold. That outside is reflecting the geopolitical situation. I think we might make progress on a few issues.
You're repeating what you've also said earlier, and what I introduced, that this is the most complex geopolitical environment since 1945. I mentioned specifically the possibility now of an escalating trade and political war between Europe and the United States over Greenland. President Trump seems to suggest that he is determined to go ahead and get Greenland either by buying it or through coercion. How are you seeing all of that playing out? I come back to it. How do you see dialogue when there is so much of confrontation and unilateralism?
So we have seen that some impasses have also been able to be dealt with. So they have been kind of breaking impasses. Look at the situation between the US and China. A little bit less than a year ago, there were tariffs of 150%. They came together, and now Mr. Trump is going on a state visit to China in April. And there are in concrete dialogues, because they found out, both of them, that this decoupling wasn't a good idea because it wasn't possible, because they're so intertwined, these economies. US depend on Chinese rare earth and what they're manufacturing. And then China also depends on some of the most advanced microchips and semiconductors from the US. So it will be very interesting when it comes to Europe and the US this week. All the European leaders are basically here. Trump is coming with almost his full cabinet. Maybe they also break some impasses this week. Who knows?
Do you see a solution to this impasse
between Europe and the United States? Because Europe is threatening now to use its potential coercive instruments, including the bazooka, and having countervailing tariffs on the United States if the US puts tariffs on Europe. And Greenland is stuck in the middle. It's a country you know well, in terms of the fact that because Denmark, a neighbor of Norway, governs Greenland. Is there a solution you see through dialogue at all? Or are we entering a world where might is right and coercion will take over? The United States says might is right, we're going to take it over.
You know, when a situation is escalating, it's harder to see how you're going to maneuver out of it. And now there is definitely hard words out there, but the U.S. and Europe also really are very dependent on each other. It's large trading partners, it's cultural connections for centuries. So let's see now when Mr. Trump arrives on Wednesday. We will have also the key European leaders here. We also will have Zelensky here, so we know there is going to be discussions on Ukraine. It's going to be discussions also on the second phase of Gaza. But it's hard to predict, but maybe the mountain air here, the clear, crisp mountain air will clear everyone's head.
Let me turn the focus to India, but continuing from what you've been telling us. The European Union and India are at very advanced stages of a trade deal. And the fact that we've been working on it with the European Union for quite some time, and we might see a culmination of that process. How significant would you think this would be, given that the overall trade framework globally is completely disrupted?
So we have seen the European Union also taking a very proactive approach here. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the Commission, was just in Latin America, still in Sao Paulo yesterday, signing this Mercosur deal with many of the big Latin American countries having a trade deal with Europe. That was not foreseen because there are many difficult issues related to also agriculture. Now I think it's time for India and the EU. There have been also traditionally many challenges there, but I think both of EU and India, and EU is the largest market in the world, still see that there are benefits, and also sending a strong signal if that deal is going to be made. I would say, though, to the trade outlook, we still expect 3% growth in trade this year. So it's not contracting, it's just growing slower than in the past. Trade is like water, it finds its way.
You've been to India in the recent past. We already have a pretty unique agreement with the EFTA nations. From your point of view, where do you think India's global trade re-engagement stands today? Do you think it's the right thing in this kind of global trade order? And this is after a time when we walked away from some trade deals around 5-10 years ago.
So it is incredible how much economic reforms that have happened in India just the last months that I was expecting, but I thought it was going to happen in the coming decade. I think the situation between the US and India has accelerated some of the political initiatives from the government. I think also, though, down the line, down the road, there will be an agreement between the US and India. But I think India's perspective now is maybe more one of big self-confidence. It's the fastest growing of the large economies in the world, contributing to 20% of the overall global growth. It's incredible. I think in that situation, India can make deals on trade that's in India's interest. I think that is the thing. India will do it when it is in the interest of the long-term development of India.
We'll come to
India back again, but I want to come back to the elephant in the room. You mentioned that Donald Trump will be here on Wednesday. There'll be European leaders. There'll be leaders from across the world. There's Zelensky there. The fear that many have is that the World Trade Order has been upended, and increasingly the old alignments are also under stress. NATO, for example. What happens tomorrow if Donald Trump goes ahead and takes Greenland? Where does that leave NATO? Where does that leave these old alliances? When you said that this is the most difficult or complex period since 1945, is that in a way that the old order is completely getting disrupted? And where does that leave organizations like NATO?
I don't think the old order is totally disrupted. We just discussed trade, for example. Still 75% of the global trade happens under the World Trade Organization, WTO's rules and regulations. But new deals are maybe not multilateral. I think on NATO and the relationship between Europe and the US, this is particularly delicate this week. I think that this alliance will continue. I think they will find a way, but it's hard to see what the path is just now. But I think we need to see like that the tension goes down, and then sometimes the negotiation tactic is also to go very far out there, and then there will be something in the middle later on. But now this is having a lot of the focus. Last week it was Venezuela, the week before it was Iran, and then it was Gaza, then it was Ukraine, and then it was also East Asia Sea. So we just have to deal with all these complexities at the same time, and hopefully we will see no real escalation into a big war, because that is not likely, but that is the most dramatic scenario that will also kill growth, because growth is back now in the global economy. More than 3% is not bad,
No, it is, but the words
from a distance, at least from an Indian perspective, seems to be in perpetual conflict. And therefore, as I said, it seems that the world order is upended. Even as we are at the World Economic Forum, on my way, I got a flash that the Iranian foreign minister is supposed to come to address the World Economic Forum. US senators are saying, why is the Iranian foreign minister being invited to the World Economic Forum? So tensions seem to be rising. And at the same time, India has been invited to be part of a board of peace on Gaza. So on Gaza, we are seeing a ray of hope. On Iran, the world seems to be in conflict. It seems a very, very complicated place and time to be in. Do you really see the potential for a dialogue? Do you see this uncertainty settling down? Or as long as Donald Trump is in the White House or at WEF, we don't know what tomorrow will bring?
So I'm much more of a glass half full than half empty guy. When we met last year in Davos, we were very concerned that the geopolitical confrontations would kill global growth. And now we're back in Davos, and the global growth is higher than we expected. We also see that the new technologies, artificial intelligence, or frontier technologies, are driving growth and investments that we haven't seen in decades. So trade is growing slower.
But it's going slowly.
The trade piece is growing slower, but we do think that the frontier technologies can replace trade as a global growth engine. So who would have thought that we were sitting here in Davos a year later, we have higher trade growth, we have huge investments in the new technologies, and the overall growth perspective is not bad. So it seems like even this catches a lot of headlines in media, that countries also find a way to adapt. I think this is also on the trade piece. They have adapted to a new reality. That's why they do bilateral trade agreements, mega trade agreements, and we will see also in global cooperation that now the Security Council in the UN is not the place where the most important negotiations are happening. They're more bilateral and different, and of course you do see interest spheres established, and this is contrary to what we predicted with multipolar world. Multipolar world would mean a lot of countries. Now it seems like there are some big movers and shakers that are in control.
So how do we describe it? If it's
Not multipolar. How do we describe a world where there's global cooperation, also bilateral cooperation taking place, and conflicts also? It almost seems as if conflict and cooperation coexist at the moment across the world.
Exactly. I think we are seeing like cooperation in a very competitive world.
Cooperation in a very competitive world. Interesting.
Yeah, but that would also raise the question that what happens to smaller economies?
where might is right cannot be their operating principle. Do you think smaller economies,
Smaller nations are at a risk in this kind of trade order and bilateral one-on-one engagements that are evolving?
Yes, I do.
So, but they will also form coalition of willings. So you mentioned EFTA earlier, where there was a trade deal between EFTA and India. EFTA is like the only international organization where Switzerland and Norway are superpowers. It's Norway, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and Iceland. But they're like 12th largest economy in the world. They came together and they're forming trade relations under
Very fast.
under the radar screen.
Yeah.
And I think the smaller nations will come together. For India, though, is now a big economy. You know, I think it's going to be a $10 trillion economy pretty soon. So India will have now to balance also in this very fragmented, competitive world.
How should India balance China?
This is, I think, India better to answer than for me. I think India so far has dealt with a very delicate situation wisely, not rushing it. But as I said, I do think there will be an agreement between India and the US down the road, because I think also US want a good relationship with India, and US also wants checks and balances in Asia, and I probably don't find anyone else than India that has the size to represent a balance. I guess that is the thinking in DC, but then there are some short-term obstacles there that have to be mitigated. No, I'm being a diplomat again.
Yeah, you're being very diplomatic, so I'm going to push you on that. If I were to ask you, Mr. Brende, the top 3 risks, and some of them are part of the discussions that you're having at the World Economic Forum, what would those top 3 risks be to ensuring a more stable world order at the moment, which allows growth, which allows trade across the world, smaller and larger economies? What would be the top 3 risks that the world is facing at the moment? If we were to say 1, 2, 3.
I think I already touched on the biggest risk that is not very likely, but with huge potential impact. It's like if the Iranian situation had escalated and got out of control, it could have affected the whole Gulf region that is also extremely important for oil and gas. So war is escalating, and with the big powers on different sides, that is the biggest risk, but hopefully not happening. Right. I would say second, probably bubbles in the economy.
AI bubble?
There can be like AI bubble, it can be a crypto bubble, there can also be a debt bubble, because we are more indebted than any other time since 1945. So many countries have as the biggest expenditure on their state budget is paying on the interest. I would say though bubbles, AI bubble and crypto bubble is easier to handle, because we have had bubbles before. We had the railway bubble, we had the electricity bubble, we had the dot-com bubble, but the technologies are still there. But the debt thing is more affecting the financial system. So that's why we really need a lot of growth moving forward to grow out of it. I would say the third one are like the black swans, like future pandemics. It is like cyber crime, warfare, those things that are the black swans.
Yeah, you're being very diplomatic in the sense that you're not including the man who you're hosting in a couple of days, Donald Trump. He's going to be in power for another 3 years. We don't know what comes next with Donald Trump. Last week it was Venezuela. You take over a country, effectively remove the leader of that country, take over their oil economy, not speaking about human rights or democracy, but speaking about oil. Do you feel that Donald Trump is one of the global risks that the world runs, this Trumpian world order, where we don't know what tomorrow will bring?
You become very Trump focused, huh?
Well, I can see all eyes even in Davos. The very fact that Donald Trump has created such a buzz that he's coming here. I mentioned the fact that you've also got, interestingly, Mr. Borge, you've got the Iranian foreign minister coming here. So you've been careful to balance, in a sense, spheres of influence. Or is that part of the problem, or am I exaggerating that as a global risk?
So the U.S. president is a fact,
yes,
and he will be there in the years to come. But in Davos, we also have a lot of other key players. We have, for the first time, the Syrian president. We have President Sisi from Egypt. We have practically 6 out of 7 G7 leaders. But it's true that Donald Trump also attracts a lot of media attention. I think one has to deal with the U.S. administration case by case, and then I think it's totally possible to have a dialogue. I mentioned India-US. I think is going to be solved. I think they're going to find ways also on the tariffs and Greenland. I think we're going to make progress even on, hopefully, on Ukraine and Gaza during this week. So I think we just have to be used to a lot of noise, and then we have to look at it in a systemic way. What can we still do in like a totally different context than we used to operate in.
You make a very interesting point. You're saying the media should perhaps focus less on the noise that comes out, emanates, let's say, from White House, and look at perhaps the other relationships that are being struck quietly under the radar in some instances that actually make the world, you hope, a better place or a more stable order. That don't focus all your attention on what happens in and out of the White House.
Am I correct?
I could have said it better myself.
Interesting.
You know, we've just got a couple of moments to go, a couple of minutes. Overall, as you sit here today from your vantage point in Davos, do you believe the world is in a better place in 2026 January than it was a year ago? Or do you believe 2026 will be a decisive year, given the fact, as we said at the outset, we are facing a very complex geopolitical environment? Is 2026 going to be the critical year in a way for the world?
The economy looks strong and stronger, been very resilient. But if you ask me about the geopolitics, I think we're worse than last year and better than next year.
And is there any
Particular geopolitical issue that troubles you the most in all these conflicts taking place? Where is we haven't resolved Ukraine. We don't know what will happen next with Iran. There are these spheres of influence that the world is being divided. Is there any particular conflict that you hope in 2026 will be resolved, or at Davos will see an actual breakthrough? Because Greenland is another new frontier that's been opened.
I think after almost 4 years, I think the Ukraine war possibly could end this year. I'm not saying it will, but I think if there's willingness, one can find a solution. I think the second steps on Gaza hopefully will be implemented, and we can see also that there will be then investments and start to rebuild the Gaza piece. I'm worried about Sudan. I'm worried about also the situation in a lot of developing countries that don't get that kind of attention because all the air is sucked out by some more media-friendly topics.
Okay.
Let's leave it there, Børge Brende. I think you've given us a sense of a broad overview, and I'm glad that the World Economic Forum is tackling all these issues head-on, whether it's trade, artificial intelligence, or indeed the conflicts that are now dominating the world order, which is why this couldn't be a more important time for the World Economic Forum. And good to have a Norwegian as the head in a way, because you, in a sense, hopefully, will bring the necessary balance to this very friction and faction-ridden world.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the trust. You know, I'm as Indian as I am European.
Really? What does that mean?
I think the strength of the World Economic Forum, of course I'm biased, but is that we are a truly impartial, independent platform. So we do have the Chinese and the Americans in the same room. We also have the Indians here with a very strong delegation. At the same time, we even have the Pakistani Prime Minister. So it's a unique platform where people meet, not necessarily agreeing, but at least we have the right people in the same room.
Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, as I said, we'll have plenty more newsmakers joining us here at our Davos Brainstorm on India Today and Business Today. No better person to kick it off than the President of the World Economic Forum himself. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us from Davos. Thank you, sir.
From overnight global cues to live Dalal Street moves, we decode what